Yeah, we're live. It's like 7:02 or 2 minutes late. I was actually just reading some other comments from some of the other stuff, which is very cool. Tonight, we're going to talk about some great stuff. I've got some books. Take a look. Hemi and LS books. I've got a couple of shirts left. We're going to do some package deals. We're going to get to all that stuff later. Tonight, though, we're going to talk about the 4.8 liter, and the video that I just put up is very cool. We tested adding boost to a naturally aspirated 4.8 liter, which is always good when you add boost to anything. Guys are showing up. Tim's here. John's here. ProCharge Mopar. Devin Nomad. Happy kids. Hello. Thank you guys all for joining. I put up the video on the 4.8 liter, and what we did first was we had a basically stock motor. This one had a piston upgrade on it because we'd heard it before, but it was all stock. Otherwise, the stock cam and the stock heads and the stock intake, basically the things that kind of determine the power. So we added a turbo to that and showed how well that worked, because even with the stock cam, you can make lots of power. Then we did a head upgrade where we put the trick flow heads in place of the factory 706 heads, and that picked up power as you might expect. And then we put a camshaft, a stage 1 turbo cam from Brian Tooley Racing, and again that picked up power as we would expect all of them to. And if you haven't seen the video, take a look. I even included all of them, and we didn't run an electronic controller, which I should have, but this was back before we had the TC1 thing hooked up, I think. And so I'd run the manual boost controller a lot back then. But the curves were always very close. I mean, it was about 6 or 7 tenths of a pound, I think, was the biggest difference when we eventually put the cam in. So the gains from the cam would have been even more than they were because it had the lowest boost of all of them. And that's kind of what we would expect. It made a lot more power. It would have more back pressure. It would open the gate early. And that's what you have when you aren't running some sort of controller to determine, to make it stay close so that we have the right amount of boost pressure, which is why I like these controllers, and having like a 3-port deal so that you have top side and bottom side, and you can even all that out and make sure that it stays closed when it's supposed to stay closed and does what it's supposed to, and you get an even boost curve. That way we get a real good direct kind of back-to-back test. This is pretty close, and it gives us a really good idea. When we added a cam, we picked up a lot of power. It would have been more had we had that extra, a little more than half a pound of boost to add to that equation, another 15 or 18 pounds or 15 or 18 horsepower. So it would have picked up even more. But we know what's going on. But the question is, and the reason that I wanted to show this in these steps the way that I did is, one, so that we can talk about them in 3 different configurations. One is going from an NA motor like a stock 4.8. You certainly could do this from any 4.8 from the wrecking yard. So going from the stock 4.8, run it NA, put a single turbo on it. In this case, it was a cheap one. It was the GT45. We ran the GT45 headers, which I don't recommend. They work and they make power, but the access to the plugs and burning plug wires is always an issue with that stuff. I would normally run, and since then, I've redone the single turbo system to work with the factory exhaust manifolds, the truck manifolds. We've just turned them around, and that makes it a lot easier. Now, we don't run any of the accessories, so the truck manifolds aren't in the way of anything. Most guys have to cut and change the outlets for them to fit around whatever kinds of accessories they're running. So for us on the engine now, that's not a problem. So we reverse the stock exhaust manifolds. Plug access is great. They're cast steel. Some of the ones I have still even have the shields on them so that they're, they keep all that heat in the turbo. They got good response, and then we made a new Y pipe for it. I do want to test some different size Y pipes in the future, run off of this configuration, but run the way that we ran this 4.8. It had I think this was even a 3-inch Y pipe, which is not ideal for what we were doing. I would go much smaller, especially on a 4.8. But this is the way that we ran, and we ran that single turbo. We ran an air-to-water intercooler. This one was a CX Racing one and not the ProCharger one that we run usually now. But we ran all that stuff. And the cool thing is that when you run this 4.8 liter turbo motor with a stock cam and the stock heads, it works really well. I mean, the power went from 330 or 40 up to, the low 500s. And we were only running a little less than 8 pounds of boost, 7 point something. And then we put the heads on, and then the heads, with no change at least to the wastegate setting, picked up another 50 horsepower, and then the camshaft picked up another 70 horsepower. And the point is that when we start out and you just add boost, especially on a 4.8, and I think even more so than on the 5.3 and the 6.0, On the 4.8, it's the mildest and smallest of the combinations. So adding boost to that camshaft in the 4.8, which is the same as the 5.3 and the early 6.0, is actually a little more aggressive. It's more camshaft in the 4.8 because the 4.8 is smaller. So it's more camshaft in that motor than it is in a 5.3. So it revs a little higher. It makes peak power a little bit higher. The truck manifold is a little bit more effective. The heads flow a little bit more, relatively speaking, on the 4.8. So all of that combination makes the 4.8 a little bit higher RPM motor than it does on a 5.3 and certainly on a 6.0. But on the 4.8, adding boost to it, you can get a lot of power. We could easily top out the flow rate of that GT45 turbo with the stock cam. So we're going to get into talking about cams when we talk about the stage where we added the camshaft. So that works really well. So if you're going for something in the 5, 6, even 700 horsepower, you can certainly get there with just boost. So that's kind of cool. And a lot of guys don't know that. They think that because we tell them all the time, you need to run a camshaft, which is a good idea because then you can make you can make a higher power number at the same or lower boost level. So that always works out good too. But you can make good power with the stock cam. And the great thing, the benefit is that it drives around like a stock cam. It idles. It's got, whisper quiet, and it's smooth, and it drives around, and it has good fuel mileage and all of that stuff. It does all the things that you come to expect from a camshaft. And it's very, very quiet too if you have an exhaust hooked up to it. But then we did the head upgrade, and the gains from the head or the camshaft vary depending on which one of those you test first. So we put the head on first, and then so the great gain from the cam was probably a little more than had we done them in reverse. And then the head would have gained more power if the combination already had the cam in. But just putting the ported head on gained about 50 horsepower. And as I talked about in the video, I don't normally recommend a head upgrade because you could top out what we know that from the stock combination, you could top out that GT45 turbo with the stock head and with the stock cam. So there's no sense in doing a head upgrade if that's all the turbo that you're going to put on it. It doesn't gain you anything. All it does, like the camshaft, is it allows you to make power at a lower boost level. Any given power level at a lower boost level. But there's no need to spend couple $1,000s, whatever a set of TrickFlow 205 heads cost, to do what you could just do by turning the boost up. It doesn't make sense. But if you're trying to make a lot of power, that 205 head's a really good head to put on that small bore motor or a 5.3. And if you want to make a lot of power, like if you want to run 2 GT45 turbos on it and turn it all the way up, then having a ported head can help you. But even then, going to 1,000 horsepower or so, normally that's still in the range of the stock head. The thing that I do like about the TrickFlow head is it will help you make power, but it also has a much thicker deck. Because one of the problems guys run into at very high boost and power levels is that they lose head gaskets because the deck thickness on the factory head really wasn't designed for boost. And the aftermarket heads are much thicker. They seal better. So if you get to that point where that becomes a critical element, obviously the aftermarket head is going to be superior to any of the factory heads. Even if you port the factory heads, which a ported 706 head or an 862 head, if it's done fully like the guys at Total Engine Airflow or other guys that do it, there's lots of good programs out there for that head. That can become very comparable to a 205 head. So that's another option. But for these kinds of levels at 1,000 horsepower and below, I would just use the stock head, do a valve spring upgrade. So those are the reasons behind whether you would do or not do a head upgrade. So now let's take a look at the camshaft. So one of the things that we always tell you is if you're going to go to the wrecking yard and get a motor, do cams and springs and boost and E85 and put big injectors in it, put a big pump in it and an intercooler, and away you go. With the cam thing, the one thing that I want to point out is we all know that if you put a cam in an LS, it adds power. That people have been doing that and I've done hundreds of tests like that. And it does it even more so under boost. We showed that you can, we picked up about 70 horsepower or something, and it would have been even more had we equalized the boost. So there's big power to be had from the camshaft. And this was a stage 1 turbo cam. But the thing that I want to point out specifically for the 4.8 is that I kind of think that this is too much camshaft. It's a 222 at 50, I think, is the intake duration on it. And that's actually pretty good size for a 4.8. It's more than it needs to be, in my opinion. Since we can top out that turbo with a stock camshaft, there's no need to have a 222 camshaft in a 4.8 unless you're going for lots of RPM. Maybe you want to put a high ram on it and maybe you want to run it to 7,500 or 8,000. Then more cam timing could help you. But like I said, since we can top out the turbo, we can even top out like 1,000 horsepower turbo with a smaller camshaft. So the way that I look at it is, okay, we can get everything out of the turbo with the camshaft. So now let's think about improving the power somewhere else. So if we put a smaller camshaft in it, we can make the thing more responsive down low. We can make it drive better down low if you're going to, I mean, if it's a dedicated drag race car, then do what you're going to do. Most of us have dual purpose cars. That's a car that we drive and have fun with on the street and then take it also to the track. So if you have that kind of car where you're doing a lot of driving and most of your driving is not going to be in boost or in very little boost, it's going to be at a lower end of the RPM range, the first 3,000 RPM, let's say, why not have a turbo or why not have a camshaft in your turbo combination that's going to make the thing more drivable, which a small cam will. And it's going to be more drivable. The turbo is going to come up better. You're still going to be able to make all the power at the top and top out the turbo if that's what you want to do. If all you want to do is make a given power level at the lowest boost level possible, which was my big thing way back in the day, do all the mods that you can NA so that you can make the same power level at a lower boost level, which is good. But that's not the way the guys see turbo stuff. The guys see turbo stuff like, okay, I want to do all of what the turbo can do. And if you can do that with a smaller cam and it drives better, particularly on the 4.8, because it's a small motor and you don't need really big cams in it. The cam that a guy would put in a 6-liter or a 6.2 is going to be really big for a 4.8. So think about that when you're choosing cams for your 4.8, whether you're trying to get, like if you have a 4.8 in your truck, especially if it's an NA thing, unless you're going to rev that thing out, you should put a mild camshaft in it. I would pick a smaller cam for a 4.8 than I would for a 5.3. And I would pick a smaller cam for a 5.3 than I would a 6.0. And obviously so on up the line. But on a turbo stuff, it will really help you. And this also comes into play if for instance, for whatever reason, and guys do this, you put something like a high ram on your 4.8, then you know that it's going to go racing. So you might want to put enough camshaft. And a lot of Matt over at Sloppy does the Sloppy Stage 2 and then a high ram and then add boost on a 4.8, but only if you're going to rev it really high, because that's a combination that is going to rev, especially on a 4.8. So if you're going to rev it to 8,000 and make power out there, then that's a good combination. But if you want to put a high ram on there, that might be even more of a reason to go to a milder cam if you're not going to rev it. But actually, if you're not going to rev it, I don't think I would recommend that high ram on a 4.8 anyway. Definitely put one of the long runner deals in there, the truck or the Trailblazer or the Fast if you wanted to spend some money on it. But most guys wouldn't. And that would be the other thing. We didn't cover that in this video because we were only looking at the cylinder head and the camshaft. But the intake would be another thing. You know, you don't want to put a short runner manifold on a 4.8 because it's going to want to rev really, really high and make power out there, and you're going to lose all the power down low. Even with a Fast, I don't think on a turbo application where I had, just like with the heads, on a turbo application where I had enough turbo to make 1,000 horsepower, I don't know that I'd spend the money on a Fast, because we could do that with the Trailblazer SS or even with a stock truck manifold. So why spend the money when you can get everything out of the turbo without spending that money? Spend that money on something else. You know, buy E85, buy a good fuel system, go out to dinner, whatever it is you're going to do with the money, but you can save it and still make the same amount of power. So if you're considering that, that would be another thing. That would be just like the cylinder heads. If you're trying to make lots and lots of power, then you might need both of those. But if you're still in the lower range, mild cam, long runner intake, and use the stock head. So that's my advice. Let's get to what you guys are doing here. But before we do that, I want to show you, I found some of my, let's take a look at this, found some of my books. I would be happy to sign these. If you are interested in them, send me, I think I have 4 or 5 of these of the LS. And then I have a few of the Hemi. The weird thing is, and I didn't notice this until I grabbed both of them, but look at the two side by side. They basically use the same layout for the cover. I mean, come on, guys. At least make them look different. Because if you walked by these and saw these on the shelf, if they were sitting next to each other, you'd go like, those are the same book. Because the banners are all the same, the font's the same, the how-to is, I mean, it's basically the same thing. I mean, you know, that's what happens. I didn't have any design input in that other than giving them the photo image. But if you guys are interested in those, let me know. Those are very, very cheap. I'll sell them to you for less than half of what you'd go buy them online for. And then I also have a few of these shirts left. I just sent out 6 or 8 shirts. I still have a few of these. We can make you a nice package deal. If you are interested in that, I'm going to put my email address here. Let me know. There we go. There's the email address. So if you are interested in it, send me an email address and say, yes, Richard, how much for the books or how much for the Killer Bee Racing shirts? And so you can kind of see for guys that haven't seen it already. We've been showing this for a couple of the live videos. So that's the back of it. Super, super cool bee there. And all of the shirts that I sent out, I signed. That's going to make it worth 20% less. Okay, let's see what you guys got going on. Let's see here. Let's see. What do we got going on? Let's answer some questions here. Lots of guys here. Lots of guys here. Daytona Beach right now at 72. Yeah, it's nice here, and it's nice here in California too. It actually cooled off. It's been very, very hot, but it's cooled off now today because I went for a run later in the day and conquered the hill that I was trying to conquer, and it was awesome. Felt good on my run, and it was cool enough that it was only about, I think it was about 80 when I went for the run. Daniel says that's Emilio from Boosted Boys, has a super setup with an LS swap. He has a 4.8 stock cam, stock heads, PFI speed, turbocharger, I believe it's an eBay. It works really well on a 4.8. I mean, if you take a look at the video and you take a look at the power curve, you're like, wow, that's kind of what I would want from a factory power curve. And that's the way that should be. If you have a consistent amount of boost and you have that power curve from the NA motor, that's what it's going to look like. I mean, it's really kind of cool. Let's see, you top out a GT45 on a 5.7 Magnum. That's actually fairly big motor for that GT45. We're going to see the same kind of thing that we saw on some of the other combinations. That GT45 is actually a better turbo for a 4.8 than it is for a 5.9. Yeah, Mike, that's right. When you put a bigger cam in it, it definitely changes the response rate. Mike's got a stock cam and his 2011 4.8 Express van. That 4.8's got to be working pretty hard to haul that Express van around. ProCharge Mopar. I am going to get a Mopar when I go down this trip. Isn't it better to spin it higher, not put such a load on the connecting rod? Well, the load is actually going to be on the piston. I don't think you're going to hurt the. Well, I take that back. If there's angle on the rod and you have lots of torque, you can do that. But I honestly don't like lots of RPM. In my opinion, bad things happen with RPM. I know that the theory behind having constant pressure on the piston and it helps with the snatch load and all that, but usually reliability goes down with engine speed, and I still feel that way. That's why all on the Big Bang stuff, we never ran them past about 6,500. I think we on the latest 6.0 we might have gone to 7,000 on that. Best to you, Richard from Denton, Texas is in the house. What's a good cam for my 2005 2500 4x4 extended cab? It has a 6-liter, probably like a truck cam, either a stage 1 or a stage 2 truck cam. There's lots of them available. I have videos up on the BTR stuff, but stuff with similar cam timing is going to do a similar thing. Trucks need a turbo. That works really good to help. I should have put up, I'll put something up on Instagram. I took a picture of the guys at Brown Tooley Racing have a their chop matrix for camshafts, and it shows the amount of overlap versus the percentage or the amount of chop. It was pretty interesting, so I took a picture of it. I just have forgotten to post it though. So it's kind of like the chop meter. James, you have a 225, 236 cam at 50, 624, 619, 113. My G8, it's an L76, 6-liter with LS3 heads. What do you think? That's a good cam. That should make good power if you're going to run boost on it. For a torque cam, towing torque converter, and a 7875, I think I might go smaller than that turbo unless you're trying to race it. Oh, James has the Ellis book already. If you want torque, the 427 stroke or V10, there you go. Free shirts. I should probably give some away, huh? I should probably give one of the, since guys are here on a Friday night, I probably should give at least one shirt away and one book away. So we'll keep talking and I'll come up with something. I need the Hemi book. Aaron, send me an email and we'll get you hooked up. But there will be a chance for you to win a free one here coming up. Can we see a maxed out GT40 on a 4.7 single overhead cam Mopar? I don't think I've ever run one of those. Mike says GT45 sounds like a great turbo. Too bad they only last 6 months. Mine's lasted years and years and years. Will my 6-liter with a sloppy stage 3 and 862 heads twin GT45s turn to 7,000? That's going to depend on your intake. Those heads are not going to flow a lot, but if you have a short runner intake, they'll all rev to 7,000. But where you're making peak power is going to be a function of that's enough cam to do it. Hopefully you're not trying to put that sloppy stage 3 in a stock bottom end, because I don't think that intake duration fits on a stock bottom end. The torque cam might be better than the stock cam down low. Hey, Richard, what's the max spring pressure do you think a stock 302 HO hydraulic roller lifter can take? We've done, I think we did stuff that was like 200 and 450. Yeah, twin GT45s are going to need a little help spooling. Nitrous works good. John, what's up? Thank you, John. Happy to help. Daniel's in the house, standing by for the chop meter. I know I need to take that. I'll post that somewhere. RPM stands for ruins people's motors. I agree. I think I'm afraid of RPM. Santa delivered my custom cam today from Howard's. Yeah, and the snatch load is bad for RPM. I just don't like it. Richard, did you ever figure out what went wrong with the Cadillac supercharger on the 6.0? I'm pretty sure that it's belt slippage, but I haven't retested it yet, because unfortunately I had to take the head studs out of that, the CA625 head studs out of it, and I gave them to, I applied them to Mike Finnegan's motor for his boat that blew up. My LS4 is getting a GT45, a BTR Stage 1 turbo cam. And the LS4 is going to be bigger, right? The LS4 is a 5.3 there. I have all the Ford build books. I actually have, if you look back here, you can see, I have a ton of those books, which I might be getting rid of. There's a ton. I have like boxes and boxes of those things. So I'm thinking about making room so I can put more stuff up on the shelves and getting rid of those books. So the cool thing is I have a lot of you guys like different things. So I have Dodge stuff and, LS stuff and Hemi stuff and old stuff, transmission things and carburetor rebuilds and all kinds of cool books that I could either give away or sell to you for a couple bucks or whatever. What about a cam and a 4.8 with turbo for a truck, better low-end torque? It's going to be a small one like that. That torque cam from BTR works good. And size the turbo and try to do everything you can to improve response rate. If you're going to do it as a remote turbo, have a small feed in a small diameter tubing feeding the turbo. Guys are saying that you should wrap it or coat it All of those things help with the 4.8. Decide on how much power you want and pick the turbo that's going to give you that and maybe just a little bit more. Don't oversize the turbo. Good specs for a 4.8, 1996 Corvette LT4 spec cam. 203, 210, 476, 478 on a 115. That'll be okay. It's still, the 210 is still going to be, that's going to be more like a, that's almost like a factory, some of the factory cams. And all of those cams, yeah, they're 115. That if you take a look at the factory cam test the video that I have up on, we did it on a 5.3, and it'd be even worse on a 4.8. But take a look at the losses from the LS6, LS1, LS3, LS2. All of those cams are going to kind of be in that range. Take a look at those and see how much they lose down low. 4,200 powers in the house. Any more testing with the Cadillac 122? I haven't done any yet. I'll have to wait till next time. Less lag on the video at 360p. So I could change the setting and there would be less lag. The lag from this is not really the setting. It's our internet connection. It's terrible here. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Tim knows. What size is the GT45? Is it 69 millimeters? Amsoil makes a 1060 now. If you want to make a boosted motor last basically forever, that may be your friend. Multiple companies also makes 1550 and 550. I don't ever put that weight oil in the stuff that we run, but I'm not doing it on the street though. We always use 530. Tom wants to sell his SR20 DET out of his Volkswagen Bug, which is an interesting combination, and put an LS in it. I think the SR20 DET is a really cool idea. Will a 416, an LS 416 rev to 7,500 with BTR 660 springs? It's not the spring that's going to determine that. It's going to be the camshaft and the head and the intake manifold are going to determine if it makes power up there. It will rev there. But there's more than just spring pressure to make it rev there. The spring actually has to be set up right. You have to have the right amount of distance from coil bind at maximum lift. You have to have the right ramp rate on the camshaft. It has to be stable. There's a lot of things that go into that. And then that means it will go there. Now, whether or not it makes power there is going to be the specs on the camshaft, how much duration it has and what the split is, how much head flow you have, and then also what intake you have. Is the runner length designed to make power at 7,500, especially on a 416? So that's going to take a fairly short runner manifold like a Super Victor or something like that. Kevin, what's up? Will a Gen 2 LT4 hot cam work in a small block Chevy with a GM fast burn head? I don't know about what do you mean, will it work? You have to make the cam is different for the LT1 and the LT4, right? The nose of the cam is different. So you have to make the gear work. And once you do that, the camshaft should work. Let's see. Mark wants to know, Richard, off topic. There's no topic. We can talk about anything on the questions. That's not a problem. Have you considered getting a first gen Colorado with an inline 5? I get 9.8 liters for 100 kilometers. I don't know what that converts to. I'd have to convert both of those to know what kind of fuel mileage it gets. Yeah, Mike, don't worry about piston speed. I need miles per gallon. That's the only way that I understand it. No way, Jose. Do you need stiffer valve springs for boost if your current ones are sufficient for your cam while NA? Maybe. How was that? Not for any reasonable amount of boost, usually. You can get 2 engines in the long box. Oh, it's a Colorado. Because the Colorado is going to be smaller than the full size car, the full size truck that I have. The problem is I need a full size truck to pull our boat. The boat's fairly big.